My parents dragged me into court to seize everything I owned, certain I had nothing worth taking. My brother sat with them, smug. Then the judge opened a sealed valuation, read one number aloud, and the entire room went silent. Before we get back to today's story, I have some exciting news to share. We have officially launched a brand new channel called Tales Beneath Skin. Over there, we are dedicating our platform to bringing you the juiciest, most jaw-dropping Reddit drama stories on the internet. We're diving deep into wild family feuds, shocking relationship betrayals, and epic tales of petty revenge. But we don't just leave you hanging with a cliffhanger. We track down every single update, plot twist, and final resolution so you get the complete, satisfying story from start to finish. Grab your popcorn, because we are serving all the tea with full context, community reactions, and top-tier narration that brings the chaos to life. Make sure to subscribe to Tales Beneath Skin right now so you don't miss out. You'll find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag. Thank you for your continued support as we grow this community. Now, back to the story. The call came at 7:14 on a Tuesday morning, and I remember the exact time because I was watching the second hand on the studio clock while I waited for the kiln to finish its cool-down cycle. I almost didn't answer. The number wasn't saved, and unknown numbers before 8 in the morning are never good news. They're either a scam about my car's extended warranty or the kind of news that reorganizes your whole life. My hands were dusted with dry clay, that fine gray powder that gets into the creases of your knuckles and stays there like a second skin, so I wiped them on my apron and picked up anyway. Am I speaking with Ava? A crisp, official voice, not a salesperson. Salespeople never get your name right on the first try. You are. This is the clerk's office at the county courthouse. I'm calling to confirm you received notice of a civil filing against you. We have a signature confirmation that the documents were delivered to your studio address last Thursday. I stood very still. Behind me, the kiln ticked as it cooled, that faint pinging of metal contracting, a sound I usually find comforting. Not that morning. I didn't receive anything, I said. What kind of filing? There was a pause, the sound of paper. A petition for the recovery and division of assets. The petitioners are listed as Warren and Colleen. She read the surname too, but I already knew it. Of course I knew it. It was my own. My parents were taking me to court. I sat down on the stool where I glaze my bigger pieces, the one with the wobbly leg I keep meaning to fix, and I let the phone rest against my ear while the clerk explained things I only half heard. A hearing date. A response deadline. My right to retain counsel. The words rolled past me like water over stone, because underneath them was a single fact I couldn't get around. The two people who made me had hired a lawyer to try to take everything I had built with my own hands. Here is what you need to understand about my family, and I'll try to say it without bitterness, though I can't promise I'll succeed. My parents did not raise me to be loved. They raised me to be useful. There is a difference, and it takes most of your life to learn it, and some people never do. My brother, Miles, was the one they loved. I was the one they relied on. When the roof needed replacing, they called me. When Miles's first 3 business ideas collapsed, they called me. When my father's pension turned out to be smaller than his lifestyle, they called me, and I paid, and I paid, and I told myself that was what family meant. I told myself that love and obligation were the same thing wearing different coats. I found out that morning that they were not. The clerk finished. I thanked her, which is a ridiculous thing to do to someone delivering news like that, but manners are the last thing to leave you. I hung up. The kiln pinged. The bowl I'd been cooling, a wide, shallow piece in a deep river blue glaze, sat behind the little window, finished, perfect, waiting. And I thought, with a strange, cold clarity that I would come to recognize as the beginning of something, they think I have nothing. That's the only reason they'd be brave enough to try. The court documents were exactly where the clerk said they'd be, jammed into the mail slot of the studio's back door, half hidden under a supplier catalog. I must have walked past them for 4 days without looking down. I brought the envelope to my kitchen table that night, poured myself a glass of water I didn't drink, and read every page twice. The language was cold and formal, but the meaning was simple. My parents claimed that over the years they had invested substantially in my so-called business, that this made them entitled to ownership of my studio, my equipment, my inventory, and any income derived from it. They wanted an accounting of everything I owned. They wanted a share. Reading between the lines of the legalese, they wanted essentially to be paid back for the crime of having a daughter who didn't stay small. The number they cited as their investment was $11,000. I actually laughed out loud, alone in my kitchen, a short, ugly bark of a laugh, because $11,000 was less than I had quietly wired into their checking account over the past 6 years. They had kept a ledger of what they'd given me. They had never once counted what I'd given them. I called my mother. I don't know what I expected. Some part of me, the small, stupid, hopeful part that never fully grows up no matter how many times it's disappointed, thought maybe it was a mistake. A misunderstanding. Maybe some consultant had talked them into it and they'd be embarrassed when I called. Colleen answered on the fourth ring. Ava. Just my name, flat, like she'd been expecting the call and had already decided how it would go. I got the papers, Mom. Then you understand our position. Not a question. Her voice had a rehearsed quality to it, the smoothness of a speech practiced in a mirror. My mother sold real estate for 20 years. She knows how to deliver a line she doesn't feel. Your position is that you're suing me, your daughter. Our position, she said, is that we were more than fair to you your whole life, and it's time you acknowledged that in a formal way. Sloan says, she stopped herself. Who's Sloan? Our advisor. She's been helping us organize our affairs. She's very impressed with how much I remember about our contributions to you over the years. Our advisor, I filed that away. I didn't know it yet, but that name, Sloan, would become the axis the whole thing turned on. Mom, I said, and I hated how thin my voice had gone, do you have any idea how much money I've sent you? Do you want me to read you a ledger? That was a gift, she said instantly. You can't demand gifts back. That would be tacky. The hypocrisy of it was so total that I couldn't even find the words. And that's when I noticed, sitting on the edge of my kitchen counter where I'd set it that afternoon, the bowl. Not the new river blue one. The old one. The first bowl I ever made, 14 years ago, in a community college night class I took because I needed something in my life that was mine. It's small and lopsided, glazed in a muddy, uneven blue, and there's a chip on the rim where I dropped it the day I brought it home. My mother had picked it up back then, turned it over, and said, "You paid tuition for this. Throw it out before someone sees it." I never threw it out. I've kept it on every counter in every apartment for 14 years. I don't fully know why. Something in me refused to let her be right about what was worthless. Mom, I said quietly, looking at that chipped rim, I have to go. I'll see you in court then, she said, and the awful thing, the thing that told me exactly how far gone this was, is that she sounded almost cheerful, like she was closing on a house. I hung up and sat in my kitchen with the bowl in my hands, running my thumb along the chip the way you'd worry a loose tooth. You paid tuition for this, she'd said, as if a thing's worth was ever obvious from the outside, as if the ugliest object in the room couldn't turn out to be the only one that mattered. I didn't sleep that night. But somewhere in the long, dark hours, the fear started curdling into something more useful. To understand why the lawsuit gutted me, you have to understand how hard I worked to earn a family that was never going to love me back. I left home at 18 with 2 duffel bags and a scholarship that covered tuition but not much else. I worked nights at a diner, mornings at a print shop, and I sent money home the entire time, not because they asked, but because Miles was 14 and I knew what the house was like when the bills didn't get paid. I remember mailing a $40 money order my freshman year and skipping meals to do it. $40. I was so proud of that money order. I thought it made me part of something. The pattern set early and never broke. When my father's back went out and he couldn't work, I covered the mortgage for 8 months. When Miles crashed his first car, I paid the deductible. When my mother wanted a nice enough kitchen to entertain her friends, I paid for the countertops, the very countertops the old blue bowl now sits on, which is a joke so bleak I can barely stand it. And through all of it, I built my studio. Quietly. In the cracks of time between everyone else's emergencies, I threw pots at 2 in the morning. I taught myself glaze chemistry from library books. And about 5 years ago, I developed a particular glaze, a durable, food-safe, low-fire formula that produces a color that's genuinely difficult to achieve and holds up in ways most glazes don't. A tableware company noticed. I licensed the formula. That license, plus a patent I filed with a lawyer named Priya, who I'll tell you more about later, quietly became the real engine of my income. I never told my family. Do you understand? Not out of scheming, out of survival. Every time they learned I had money, the money left. So I let them believe the studio was a charming little failure that I propped up with waitressing shifts. I let them pity me. It was easier than being harvested. Which brings me to Sloan. I looked her up the day after the phone call. Sloan, principal consultant, at a firm with a website so glossy, it looked like a perfume ad, soft focus, gold lettering, phrases like legacy stewardship and intergenerational wealth alignment. Her headshot showed a poised woman around 40, blazer, warm but cool smile. The kind of face that's engineered to make retirees feel they're finally being taken seriously. My parents met her, I learned later, at a financial wellness seminar in a hotel conference room, the free lunch kind, where the lunch is the bait. Sloan had made them feel important. She told my mother that her instincts about money were remarkable. She'd told my father he'd been underrecognized his whole career. She had, in short, done what my parents had spent their lives waiting for someone to do. She flattered them into believing they deserved more than they had. And then, apparently, she'd helped them realize where the more might come from. Me. 2 things snagged in my mind about Sloan, and I couldn't stop circling back to them. The first, her bio claimed a certification from an institute I'd never heard of, and when I searched the institute, the website had been registered 8 months earlier. 8 months. A credentialing body that predated its own credentials by less than a year. The second, my mother in a later call let something slip. Sloan already knew about your equipment, she said, proud. She'd looked into your business situation before we even asked. She's thorough. She'd looked into my business situation before we even asked. I set the phone down slowly. A family wealth consultant, hired to organize my elderly parents' modest affairs, had, before being asked, investigated the private business of their adult daughter. That is not stewardship. That is reconnaissance. Sloan hadn't stumbled into my family. She had gone looking for it. And I had a cold, certain feeling that my parents were not her clients so much as her instruments. I picked up the blue bowl again. Ran my thumb over the chip. She thinks she knows what I'm worth, I thought. She has no idea what she's touching. There is a specific moment when fear stops running the show. For me, it came at 3 a.m. on the 3rd sleepless night, sitting cross-legged on my studio floor, surrounded by the tools I'd earned one by one over 14 years. I looked at my hands, the calluses, the burned scars from the kiln, the permanent gray in the knuckle creases, and I thought, these built everything they want to take. And they hired someone to help them take it because they think I'm too soft to fight. They had made a category error. My parents mistook patience for weakness. Sloan mistook a potter for a pushover. And the thing none of them understood, the thing that would end up being the whole game, was that I knew Sloan's world better than she knew mine. Because here's what people forget about a licensing and patent deal. To negotiate one, you have to become fluent in the exact vocabulary the frauds use as a costume. Valuation methodology, asset structuring, fiduciary duty, chain of ownership. I had spent years across the table from real attorneys and real financial people, learning that language out of necessity. Sloan was performing expertise. I had been forced to actually acquire it. The next morning, I called Priya. Priya had drafted my patent filing and structured my licensing agreement 4 years earlier. She was in her early 40s, precise, unhurried, with a habit of pausing for a full 3 seconds before answering any question so that you knew whatever came out had been weighed. I'd always liked that about her. In a family of people who spoke before they thought, 3 seconds of silence felt like being handed a glass of cold water. I told her everything. The lawsuit, the $11,000, Sloan. The seminar, the reconnaissance. Priya was quiet for her 3 seconds. Then she said, Ava, I want you to send me the exact name and firm of this consultant, and I want you to do something else, and I need you to trust me even though it will feel counterintuitive. Okay. I need you to not defend yourself yet. Don't send them your financials. Don't prove them wrong about your net worth. Right now, they believe you're broke. That belief is the most valuable thing you own. Let them build their entire case on it. I understood immediately. It was the same principle as a glaze. You don't reveal the true color until the fire. What comes out of the kiln looks nothing like what went in. They think they're suing a failing potter, Priya went on. Let them keep thinking that all the way to the courtroom. In the meantime, you and I are going to do two things. First, we're going to build an airtight record of every dollar you've actually given them over the years, bank transfers, receipts, everything. Second, I'm going to look very carefully into your parents' friend Sloane. Because a woman who investigates the daughter before the parents ask her to is not running a consultancy. She's running a play she's run before. That word, before, landed in my chest like a struck bell. I spent the following week in a way I never had in my life, as a hunter instead of a provider. I pulled 6 years of bank statements and highlighted every transfer to my parents' account in yellow. The pages turned into a solid wall of yellow. $41,000, not 11. 41, and that was only the traceable money. Only what went through the bank and not the cash and the countertops and the deductibles and the 8 months of mortgage. Priya, meanwhile, went to work on Sloane. And what she found in the first week alone made the back of my neck go cold. Sloane's firm had existed for less than 2 years. Before that, she had operated under a slightly different name, in a different county, with a different specialty, senior transition planning. And in that prior life, there was a civil complaint. It had been settled quietly and sealed, but the docket entry still existed, a fossil in the public record. An elderly couple who alleged their advisor had steered them into signing documents that transferred control of assets, then extracted fees against those assets until there was almost nothing left. She had done this before, and the family she'd hollowed out had been too ashamed to make it public. I looked at that docket number on my screen for a long time. Then I got up, walked to the counter, and picked up the blue bowl. Throw it out before someone sees it, my mother had said. 14 years I'd kept the ugly, chipped, worthless thing. I held it up to the light. No, I said out loud to no one. I don't think I will. I could have waited for court. Priya advised patience, and Priya was usually right. But there was one person in this whole disaster I wasn't willing to write off without trying, and that was my brother. Miles wasn't cruel. That was the hard part. My parents were the architects. Sloane was the engineer, but Miles was just weak. A soft, frightened man of 29 drowning in debt from an app that never launched. And I knew that Sloane and my parents had convinced him that going along with the lawsuit was his way out. He'd get a share. He'd finally stop being the family failure. I understood the appeal of that story better than anyone. I'd spent my whole life chasing the same approval. I met him at a coffee shop 3 blocks from his apartment. He came in hunched, wouldn't meet my eyes, ordered nothing. Ava, this wasn't my idea, he started immediately. I know, I said. I know exactly whose idea it was. He flinched. Sloane says the studio's basically worthless anyway, so it's not like we're taking much. She says it's about principle, about mom and dad being respected. Miles, I kept my voice very calm. Calm is a weapon almost no one expects. Do you know what Sloane's fee is? He blinked. She's helping us out of the goodness of her heart. Miles, she takes a percentage of whatever the lawsuit recovers. Did anyone tell you that? Did anyone show you the fee agreement mom and dad signed? The color drained out of his face, and I understood he'd never seen it. Of course he hadn't. He was a foot soldier, not a partner. I slid a single sheet of paper across the table. Not the whole file, Priya was strict about that. Just one thing, a printout of the sealed prior complaint, the docket entry, the earlier name Sloane had used, the county, the words transferred control of assets and extracted fees highlighted. Miles read it. Read it again. His hands started to shake. This could be someone else. Same name. It's her, Priya confirmed it. Miles, she found an old couple, took everything they had, and made them too ashamed to say a word. And now she's found Mom and Dad, except Mom and Dad don't have enough for her to bother with, so she needed a bigger target. She needed one they'd hand her willingly. I let that sit. She needed me. He looked like he might be sick. Why are you showing me this and not them? Because Mom and Dad won't believe me. But I thought, and here my voice betrayed me, cracked right down the middle, 14 years of hope leaking through, I thought maybe you still might. For one single second, I saw the brother I'd paid a car deductible for. Then his phone buzzed on the table, face up, and we both saw the name. Sloan. He grabbed it too fast. I have to take this. Miles. I have to take this, Ava. And he was up, and out the door, phone pressed to his ear, and through the window I watched him nodding, being reeled back in real time. I sat alone with 2 cold coffees. I wasn't surprised, exactly. But I understood something in that moment that I'd needed to understand. I could not save Miles by asking. Sloan had a grip on this family that I could not loosen with words or evidence handed over gently in a coffee shop. If it was going to break, it would have to break all at once, in a room she couldn't control, in front of a person she couldn't charm. It would have to break in front of a judge. Sloan made her move the day after my coffee with Miles, which told me everything about how tightly she was monitoring the family. My phone rang, unknown number, of course, and a warm, textured voice said, Ava, I don't think we've properly met. I'm Sloan. I work with your parents. I know who you are. A soft laugh, unbothered. I'm sure this whole situation feels very adversarial to you, and I want you to know it doesn't have to. I'm actually reaching out because I think there's a version of this where everyone walks away whole. She had the cadence of a hostage negotiator who'd read one book about it. Your parents don't want to hurt you. They just feel unseen. If you were willing to make a good faith gesture, a settlement, something reasonable, we could keep this out of a courtroom entirely. Courtrooms are so public, so permanent. So public, so permanent. There it was, the tell under the tell. She wasn't afraid of me losing. She was afraid of the record. A woman with a sealed complaint in her past does not want a fresh, open, public one. How much of a gesture were you thinking? I asked, keeping my voice small and worried, the failing Potter she believed I was. Well, she said, warming, hearing exactly what she wanted to hear, given the modest nature of your business, I'd hate to overreach. But if you were able to sign over an ownership interest, say, a controlling one, with me as a neutral administrator to keep peace in the family, I really think we could put this behind us. There it was, fully in the open. She didn't want a settlement. She wanted the same thing she'd wanted from the old couple: control. Administrative control of an asset and a fee against it forever. My parents were the door. I was the house she meant to move into. Let me think about it, I said, my heart pounding, my voice meek. Of course, take your time. A pause, though I should mention delay tends to be expensive for everyone. I hung up and immediately called Priya and told her every word, and Priya was quiet for far longer than 3 seconds. Ava, she finally said, did you record that? I had. My state allows one-party consent, and Priya had told me on day 1 to record every call. Every single one. Then she just handed us the case, Priya said, and for the first time in 15 years of knowing her, I heard something like fierce joy in her voice. A consultant with a sealed history of asset stripping just solicited controlling interest in the target's business, on a recorded line, while acting as fiduciary to the opposing parties. That's not a family dispute anymore. That's a pattern. That is exactly what the prior couple couldn't prove. We worked for 2 weeks straight after that. Priya located the elderly couple from the old case, a retired schoolteacher and her husband, and reached out through their former attorney. At first, they wanted nothing to do with it. Shame is a strong lock. But when they learned Sloan was doing it again, to another family, something turned. The wife, whose name I'll keep to myself, agreed to provide a sworn statement. I couldn't stop her for us, she told Priya on the phone, and Priya relayed it to me, and I wrote it on a card and taped it above my kiln. but maybe I can stop her for you. Meanwhile, the hearing loomed. My parents refused every attempt at contact. Miles went silent. And Sloane, believing I was a frightened woman stalling before I inevitably folded, pushed the case forward, confident, sloppy, certain of the one thing that would destroy her, that I had nothing worth fighting for. The night before the hearing, I sat in my studio with the lights off and the blue bowl in my lap. My mother's voice, 14 years old, echoed in the dark. You paid tuition for this. Throw it out before someone sees it. Tomorrow, I thought, someone was finally going to see it. All of it. The true worth of the thing they'd told me to throw away. I set the bowl carefully back on its shelf where it had earned its place, and I went home to sleep, and for the first time in 3 weeks I did. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Television teaches you to imagine marble and vaulted ceilings, but real courtrooms are often just tired rooms with fluorescent lights and carpet the color of weak coffee. I found that oddly steadying. This was not a stage for a performance. This was a place where things got weighed. My parents arrived first, and they arrived dressed for a victory. My father in the navy blazer he wore to funerals and closings. My mother in the cream suit she saved for occasions where she wanted to look expensive. And between them, radiating that engineered warmth, was Sloane, taller than her headshot, blazer immaculate, resting one manicured hand on my mother's forearm in a gesture of ownership so casual that no one but me seemed to notice it for what it was. Miles trailed behind them, hunched, gray-faced, not dressed for anything. They had their own attorney, a bored-looking man Sloane had clearly selected and Sloane had clearly briefed, because he kept glancing at her before he spoke. My mother caught my eye across the room and gave me a small, pitying smile, the smile of a woman who has already spent the money. Priya sat beside me, calm as still water. On the table in front of us was a single closed folder. Nothing else. My parents' side had a rolling cart stacked with binders, the theater of a big case. We had one folder. My mother looked at it and her pitying smile widened. The hearing opened. My parents' attorney stood and laid out their story with the fluency of a man reciting someone else's words, that they had poured their resources into their daughter's doomed little business, that they were owed recognition and restitution, that they sought an accounting of my assets and a fair division thereof. He gestured at me as he said, doomed little business, and I let my shoulders round, let myself look exactly as small and defeated as they needed me to be. Sloane watched me with satisfaction. She thought she was watching a woman about to break. Then Priya stood. Your Honor, she said, the petitioners have requested an accounting of the respondents' assets. We're happy to provide one. In fact, we anticipated the request and had a certified, independent valuation of my client's business interests prepared and sealed to be opened by the court. We'd ask that Your Honor read the summary figure into the record so there can be no dispute about its authenticity. The judge, a lean, tired-eyed woman who had clearly seen every kind of family devour itself, raised an eyebrow. The petitioners are seeking a share of these assets. Any objection to the assets being valued? The board attorney glanced at Sloane. Sloane gave a small, confident nod. Let them read it, that nod said. It'll be nothing, and nothing is easy to divide. She had no idea. She had built her entire case on the belief that there was nothing there. No objection, the attorney said. Priya slid the sealed envelope forward. The clerk carried it to the bench. The judge broke the seal, unfolded the single page inside, and read silently for a moment. I watched her eyebrows lift very slightly. Then she read the summary figure aloud, in the flat, clear voice judges use for numbers. The number was large. It was the licensing revenue, the patent, the royalty stream valued forward, the studio, the inventory, the whole quiet engine I had built at 2 in the morning while my family slept and assumed I was failing. It was a number that did not belong to a doomed little business. It was a number that made the rolling cart of binders look like a child's diorama. The room went silent. True silence, the kind with weight. My mother's mouth opened. My father leaned forward as if he'd misheard. And Sloane, I was watching Sloane, only Sloane went very still, and I saw the exact moment the arithmetic changed behind her eyes. Because a woman like Sloane doesn't feel shock. She recalculates. And what she was recalculating in that frozen second was that the target she'd assumed was empty was in fact the richest mark she'd ever found, and that she had just on the record in open court exposed her intention to seize control of it. "Well," the judge said dryly, "that is considerably more than $11,000. She set the page down. "Counsel, given this valuation, I assume the petitioners wish to proceed." And I saw the trap she didn't even know she was setting, and I saw Sloane's attorney open his mouth to say yes, greed moving faster than sense. Priya stood again. "Before the petitioners respond, Your Honor, the respondent would like to submit additional material relevant to the court's understanding of how this action came to be filed. It bears directly on the conduct of the petitioner's financial advisor, who has been present in this courtroom and involved in this matter throughout." The judge's tired eyes sharpened. "Proceed." Priya opened the single folder, and one by one, calmly, she laid it out. The fee agreement my parents had signed, granting Sloane a percentage of anything recovered. The document Miles had never been shown. The certification from an institute registered 8 months after Sloane began claiming it. The prior name, the prior county, the sealed complaint, and the sworn statement of a retired schoolteacher who described, in plain and devastating language, how the same woman had stripped her and her husband of nearly everything they owned under the banner of keeping peace in the family. And then the recording. Priya requested to enter it, the judge allowed it, and the courtroom filled with Sloane's own warm, textured voice, offering to serve as a neutral administrator if I would simply sign over a controlling interest, spoken while she was the paid fiduciary of the people suing me. I did not look at Sloane during the recording. I looked at Miles. And I watched my brother's face come apart, not with the shock of new information, because he'd read the printout in the coffee shop, but with the shame of a man hearing proof of the thing he'd chosen not to believe. He put his face in his hands. When the recording ended, the silence came back, heavier than before. The judge set down her pen. "I want to be very clear about what I'm looking at," she said slowly. "I have a fiduciary who solicited controlling interest in the assets of the party her own clients are suing. I have a documented prior pattern of the same conduct. And I have a lawsuit that, on this record, appears to have been engineered less to recover a family debt than to deliver a business into that fiduciary's hands." She looked over her glasses at Sloane. "Is that a fair summary?" Sloane opened her mouth. For the first time, the warmth failed her. "Your Honor, this is a mischaracterization. I've only ever acted in the family's interest." "You are not counsel in this matter, and you are not a party," the judge said flatly. "You will not speak again unless asked." She turned to my parents, and her voice changed, not gentler exactly, but slower, the way you speak to people who are about to understand something terrible. "Sir, ma'am, do you understand what your advisor was arranging for you?" My father looked at Sloane. My mother looked at Sloane. And Sloane, for the first time, would not look back at either of them. That was the moment it broke. Not with shouting, with a hand that did not reach back. My mother made a small sound. My father sat down as though his legs had simply stopped. "This action is dismissed," the judge said, "and I will be forwarding this recording and these documents to the appropriate authorities for review. Ms." She used Sloane's current professional name, then her prior one, letting both hang in the air. "You can expect to hear from them." She looked at me just briefly, and I could not read her expression, but I liked to think it was something close to respect. "The respondent keeps what she built." "All of it." The consequences arrived the way real consequences do, not in a single thunderclap, but as a slow, thorough dismantling. The recording and the documents went where the judge said they would. The state licensing board that governed advisors like Sloane opened a formal review. The false credential alone was enough to begin, and the sworn statement and the recording carried it the rest of the way. Within a few months, her certifications were revoked, and her firm, the glossy website, the gold lettering, the legacy stewardship, was gone. The retired schoolteacher's old case, once buried under shame, became the anchor of a new complaint, and this time it was not sealed, and this time it was not quiet. Sloane was ultimately charged in connection with the earlier couple's losses. Priya told me later that a second former client had come forward after word spread, and then a third. The thing about a woman who preys on families is that there is never only one family. There is only the most recent one. She never touched a cent of mine. She never touched the studio. The doomed little business kept doing exactly what it had always quietly done. My parents were not charged with anything. They were, in the end, more foolish than malicious, greedy, yes, and cruel to me in the particular way that only family can be, but ultimately Sloane's marks as much as her weapons. That's a hard sentence to write, because part of me wanted them punished. But watching my mother realize in that courtroom that the woman who'd made her feel finally seen had been measuring her for the same knife the whole time, that was its own kind of sentence. There, standing in the small circle of friends, my mother had bragged to evaporated. People talk. The couple who'd tried to sue their own daughter and been publicly exposed as a con artist's puppets did not get invited to many dinners after that. They have not apologized. I've made peace with the likelihood that they never will. Some people can't afford the currency an apology is paid in. Miles is a different story, and this is the part I hold on to. He called me 2 weeks after the hearing. No excuses this time. Just, Ava, I'm so sorry. I let them use me against you, and I did it because I was broke and scared, and I wanted them to think I was worth something. And that's the exact thing they did to you your whole life. I finally get it. I'm so sorry. I didn't forgive him all at once. I want to be honest about that because the movies would have us hug in the rain and be healed, and real life is slower and more careful than that. What I said was, I hear you. Let's start with coffee, just coffee. And we did. And then we did it again. It has been months of coffees now, small and steady, my brother slowly becoming someone I can imagine trusting. He's paying down his debt on his own. He refused the help I offered, which is the first time in his life he ever refused help, and somehow that meant more to me than any repayment could have. We are building something new out of very old, damaged material. It's slow. It's real. It's ours. As for me, I'm still in the studio. I still throw pots at 2 in the morning when I can't sleep, though I sleep better now than I have in years. The licensing deal grew. I hired 2 assistants. I teach a night class once a week, the same kind of class I took 14 years ago, and there's always at least one student who brings me their first crooked, lopsided piece with their face braced for judgment, certain it's worthless. I keep the blue bowl on the shelf by the window now, where the morning light catches the chip on its rim. Sometimes a student notices it and asks why a place like mine displays something so imperfect, and I tell them the truth. I tell them that someone I loved once held that bowl and told me to throw it out before anyone saw it. And I tell them that the most valuable things you'll ever make are usually the ones other people can't recognize the worth of, and that includes, most of all, yourself. They told me to throw it out. I kept it for 14 years. Turns out I was right about what it was worth. Turns out I was right about a lot of things.